um, live thing, they counted me down for my speech, and they were like 4, 3, and then I went, and then I started talking. But I was hoping they'd show that, but they didn't.
That's epic.
That's, I was laughing, but no one else was.
So, ladies and gentlemen, my iWatch just notified me that the Beth and Kelly show is now live.
Yes, we're live, and this is episode 10, dude. This is the 10th week in a row that we have done a Friday nerdy music teacher hang with ourselves and someone awesome.
It's a pretty big commitment. That's more than 2 months, dude.
Good. So that's funny. And it started as like, well, we're going to talk anyway, so maybe someone cares to listen. And now it's like kind of a thing, which is really fun. And so in honor of episode 10, we have our friend Ashley Shabankareh. And I said it right, right?
You said it right. You nailed it.
Who is in New Orleans at this time. And, or I guess it's New Orleans or Nolans, if you want to do it right, right?
Actually, the first one was the most correct.
Yeah. Well, no, I've only been once, and it was for Jen this year. And I took my daughter, and we asked, I mean, my general feeling is ask someone driving a cab where to go, how to say things. So our cab driver, who was a native, told us that it needed to be New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
Or Nolans. But that New Orleans was pretty not cool. So what my cab driver said. But
I feel like
we're getting feedback from Ash.
I feel like we have like differing opinions on the pronunciation of New Orleans. I mean, I also hear New Orleans. Like
I've heard that.
So, I mean, I think it's mainly also it's just interesting talking about dialects. I think part of it is even neighborhood to neighborhood, the way that we communicate. But you know.
Yeah. So this guy grew up in Treme, so that's what he said. But it is interesting. And where Beth and I live in Seattle, there are no variants. It is Seattle.
It is so Seattle. And
you say Seattle,
you know, Ashley,
or you said it wrong.
Ashley, I have to say, I spent my very first year of college at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. And I came from Montana, so very crazy, like big, huge, crazy leap for
culture shock, if you will.
Yeah, who just got out of high school in Montana to move down to Mobile. And so there's so many things we could unpack about that, but since you are currently sitting basically in the convergence of 2 major hurricanes, I just wanted to say, like, I remember the very first time I had to, like, get out the tape and tape my windows and hop in a car and go up to, like, Tuscaloosa to get away from the storm. That was a huge, that was crazy.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
It's a whole different experience.
Yeah. And you're going through that right this second while on the Beth and Kelly show. So
I mean, I feel like I'm relatively calm, cool, and collected right now. So, you know, the charts look like spaghetti still.
Yeah.
And it is a form of hurricane charts, spaghetti charts. So
okay. I think this shows your true dedication to the craft and field of music education.
Yes.
It does. It shows you that I like learning in general.
Yes.
So usually what we do when we have a guest is we talk about how we know that person. And Ashley and I don't know each other like super well or for a super long time, but we have a mutual love for each other because we're two gals that play the trombone, and all gals and non-binary pals that play brass instruments. We sort of just know that we understand each other, I think.
You need to team up.
Yeah, man, it's like, let's hook up. So Ashley, correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, but I think what happened is I wrote an article. I was really pissed off, and I mean have been forever, about just like all of the sexism in the field of educational jazz and tromboneness and big bands and all of that. And I mean, it's not anything new, but what was new is that there were some Me Too was starting to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a suicide in the jazz community, and one of the requests in this beautiful woman's suicide note was basically, if there's anything you can do to change the sexism in the jazz community, please do it. And I was like, well, that is my call to arms at this time. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote an article, and it was the day after Trump was elected is when I wrote the article. And I submitted it to WMEA's magazine and was pretty startled that they published it, because it was, I called out a lot of people. It was fairly edgy, I guess. And then Jen picked it up and published it as well. And I think it was because of that article that I was asked to consider serving on the gender and equity teams for Jen, which you were very involved with. Is that right?
Yeah, that's totally it. I remember seeing that article, and my first reaction was, oh my gosh, there's more people like me in the world. And like, it was just so refreshing. I had this moment where I was like, I need to meet this fellow unicorn, because I think a lot of us were really keen to the fact of gender issues, especially women in jazz are very keen to the fact that we are siloed first by our gender and not by our race. And so I was really keen to that fact, amongst the other things. But then I saw the article and I went, okay, this is like so great. This is someone else probably saying this sort of stuff. So yeah, that's definitely and I don't know who I asked. I asked somebody for your email. I was like, who has her email address? I need to reach out to this person. And then I remember seeing your presentation at the conference in 20, whatever year it was. You presented a gender-based topic.
It was Reno.
It was Reno. Mm-hmm. And I was just like,
let's do this thing.
This is amazing. This is just giving me life. It just gave me life, like so much life. And yeah, so I
haven't really done a whole lot for Jen as an organization, whereas you have done everything. Like, I'm telling you, as far as like education organizations having their business together, Jen should be the model for everyone. They got it going on. Like,
man, they have
applying to present at the conference has new, like, the intake form is very, very different, and it is clear that undoing discriminatory systems is a priority. Mm-hmm. And that is what I am calling for in other organizations. It's not okay to just say, we're going to play more music by women or people of color. We need to actually spend time and do the hard work to dismantle the systems that caused this in the first place. And I would love it if you would speak to that a little bit.
Of course. I mean,
it would have been easy.
Yeah.
That was a heavy lift.
No, I mean, it didn't happen just singularly like with myself. It was really a perception shift overall. And I feel like should first start with the fact that jazz is Black music, and so many white individuals and other persons of color have made their careers in Black music. And if we don't start there as our starting point, we're doing it wrong. I mean, honestly, I think that is plain and simple the quick way to state it. But on a much deeper level, the methodology in which we have been instructed in music education for years has been a very colonized form of thinking. We have colonized ourselves, and of course there's a lot of calls to decolonize, but I think beyond that we also have to indigenize the spaces as well. That is a different conversation, and I'm happy to go down that one later. We can have that one later.
Whatever, let's do it.
But I think that has caused like that sort of system and structure that has been in place historically for years and years and years has caused, and this is not a problem just of music organizations, but all organizations in terms of maintaining the dynamic of having white leaders in power, often men in power, and serving what they consider, and I hate this term, but like underserved communities, at-risk communities. And at the end of the day, these individuals aren't at risk any means more than someone else that is their white counterpart. They're under-resourced. And anyways, that's just like the philosophical framework here, and also the reality framework here.
But actually, without significant buy-in from other people on the board, that wouldn't have mattered, right? Like
exactly.
None of this work happens unless you
have a community,
a critical mass of buy-in.
Yeah,
it's true, and that process takes work. Like I have to be so transparent. I feel like right now a lot of folks are feeling like they can just take a shortcut into doing the work, and that's just not how this work happens. This work in terms of equality for all individuals, regardless of race or gender, it takes time.
It's a lifetime of
it
work.
Is, and it's not like you do it and then you get a medal for it. You always have to be working at it
for the rest of your days.
Ongoing. And I think really one of the first things on my end was going through this process of going through all the data, like looking at the data and like recognizing not everyone provided us with that data. Why did I pick up a pen? I don't know. It felt like I needed to talk with it.
Hey, I'm holding too. I was holding them too.
So
we are nerds.
The teacher in me tells me I need to point with some stuff and not with my fingers because that's insulting. But people who are listening to this as a podcast version don't realize that distinction.
Three of us are all holding pens.
Anyways, so in doing a lot of that data dive, I mean, the representation of data as it related to both gender and race and age was so representative of the data collected in the census, in the largely white male population. And again, this is Black music. And it really, I have to give so much kudos to the organization overall, just for being so willing to commit to change, being willing to ask for data, being willing to make these really amazing changes for the benefit of all of its members.
It's harder to do so.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more work to change how you're doing it than to just keep doing it how you have been.
Yeah. And
well, can we also point out that, before Jen, there was IAJE that fell apart. And so they learned by failure, okay, we got to change. So the new incarnation of the organization, so much stronger.
Yeah. And it's really beautiful to see how much individuals are understanding it and getting it. And I think a part
Yeah.
of that is the much larger critical consciousness of the state of being that we're in now. Folks
Right.
are much more critical of the fact of gender bias. Folks are a lot more critical now of racism. Folks are a lot more critical now of the racist policies and systems that have been in place. But awareness doesn't always translate into
Right.
the actually doing the work and changing these systems. So yeah, I gotta say, all of the things that have been happening in my time on the board so far have been incredible, and
So magnificent
it makes
and
me so happy.
breathtaking. I love it. And for you and everyone who's making that happen, like, so on point, totally nailing it. It's an inspiration for all of the organizations. And you know, like, to be an older white man who has made your career off of performing and teaching jazz music, it's got it, the reconciliation it is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And some are willing to say, you're right, I never really thought about that.
Mhm.
Sorry, I screwed up. I'm going to do better. Let's go. How can I help?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And others are not. But if you want to work for any of the three of us, time's up. You know, like,
Yeah.
that's what's also fun is I feel empowered to say, no, I'm not going to hire you.
Mhm.
Why should I?
Yeah, it honestly, I think this time frame as well has brought into light kind of the ways that in which, or rather the methods in which things are working and sitting with people more than others. So I actually had this conversation just a couple days ago. I feel like this is a conversation I keep coming back to with folks in terms of the calling in of folks, the calling out, and cancel culture. Like, and this time more than ever, we have to start by calling in.
Yes,
You know, if we
we
if we
do.
aren't if we aren't calling in, we aren't calling in folks from a place of love to show them the ways in which things have been wrong, or how something offended you, or how, you know, the way in which they're behaving is wrong. I mean, just for lack of a better word right now, is wrong.
Yeah.
We aren't doing our community any justice. We are only perpetuating the fact that they might go somewhere else and do the exact same thing.
Right.
And then, I mean, that being said, I 100% understand calling folks out. And I understand the ways in which it's happening right now.
Yeah.
But again, if we don't figure out ways to hold folks accountable so that they don't just go off and do literally the exact same thing,
Right.
we aren't doing any justice to our society and to our communities. But
Actually,
yeah,
curious about your opinion on this because
yeah.
I have spent probably 20 years trying to do that. And I'm feeling exhausted. And but I still have white privilege, so I continue to do that because it's my duty to do so. But I'm also a woman, so I have like layers of it's a little more complicated, and I feel like I need white men to be doing more. I feel like I'm lifting as much as I can, and I'm starting to feel
Your back is gonna break.
resentment. Yeah.
No, I totally get that. I think that brings up a really good point in terms of talking a little bit about accountability partners. And for me, in terms of doing this work, I feel like I have it from a different end. I'm a Middle Eastern woman.
Yeah.
And, you know, just for some context and clarity here, I consider myself a person of color because my whole life I've been treated like I'm brown.
Yeah.
But according to the census, I'm white. And
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
yeah,
fascinating.
so Middle Eastern and North African individuals, MENA for short, we're considered to be white in the guise of race in America, which again, we have not been treated like
Right.
we are white individuals. Uh, and so for me, I feel like I come at it from like this kind of weird space of being the other that you select on your race marker because you just don't feel like you belong to anything that's listed on traditional markers. That being said, I feel like my experience has always been shaped in the fact that I'm viewed just because I outwardly am in, again, the way I frame myself, I'm ethnically ambiguous looking, that most folks tend to use me as their scapegoat in the room, whether they're white or whether they're black or brown, as the
Right.
person to like be their ally. And so I feel like I've always been in this weird space of like, okay, this is weird. Like I view myself as a person of color, so I'm more aligned in this conversation with BIPOC, BBIA folks. But you know, you're coming over here and like really dropping a lot of your white guilt on me on this end. So I just
Right.
don't like how do I engage with this? But I have found that as I've grown as both an individual and just like growing within the context of community, that I have really relied upon accountability partners and not just saying like we're holding each other accountable, but someone that has the privilege and the power that can actually step up and say something for me in situations where I'm not going to be the voice that's heard in the room. And so
Cool.
as it relates to education, like, and I'm really thinking about this from like an education lens.
Yeah.
I think about it a lot in the school context. We as music educators tend to be that siloed person. Like
Yes.
we are in our little castle in the clouds and no one else touches us. And in order for, you know, as it relates to, again, to a school level, taking it back to education here, that fight's not going to make it all the way through the doors that it needs to make it in unless you find a counterpart in a different like area, a different part of your school that is
Right.
willing to champion alongside you.
Right.
And it's the only way that you're going to save yourself. Like, again, lack of a better framing here, like saving yourself from the continual emotional trauma that goes through that process of trying to fight this fight.
Right.
Um,
You can't do
so
it alone.
you can't, you
it's too
literally
big.
can't. You can't.
Well, I mean, in our own little microcosm, Kelly, that's what we were together at Washington Middle School.
Yeah. And you know what? We don't even work together anymore, and we still are.
We still are.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, like, we would take our needs and our concerns to each other, and that started right in the interview room, basically. And at that point, we took on each other's needs and desires and goals.
And advocated as a
Yeah.
team. Which
And that's how things got done. That's how things got done. That's how like things got put on the map. You know,
I like taking Ashley's idea of accountability partners, which I find extremely useful. That is a really great way to think about things. Like, man, this person is like blowing up my Facebook in a way that I can't handle right now. I've already responded 3 times. I am getting white-splained, mansplained. This isn't working. And reaching out to someone who will have your back and asking them to try and take it on. That's inspiring.
Or
doing it for our music departments and our students too.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even just asking for help on like, hey, how do I word this message? I want to talk about, in fact, I asked Kelly for help on this at the end of my school year. I was like, at my online awards ceremony, I'd like to address what happened with George Floyd. How should I talk about this? And Kelly helped me craft a message, you know?
Yeah.
Accountability partners to make it so that issues are not swept under the carpet, and you know, you're like getting feedback and support all at the same time and help.
You're keeping each other in check. And also On a much deeper level, you can have that opportunity and give yourself the grace of maybe you didn't use the right terminology and you have
Yeah.
that friend that's able to correct you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and teach you or like give you guidance in that way that doesn't come off as a value judgment or of
Right.
any kind.
Or a cancellation.
Exactly.
From a place of love, let's do better together.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's always from like that person should be with you in a place of love, but also should be the person that's willing to fight the fight with you. There's always more strength in numbers.
I totally love
Absolutely.
that. So one reason that I felt like I wanted Ashley to be on this episode was very strategic because school is starting.
Yes.
For some districts, it's already started, but for Seattle, where we're at, it starts a week from today.
Oh wow. Yeah, we're already in it. We're in the thick of it.
Yeah. So there are a lot of viewers who are interested in. I think it's pretty well understood that what we need to be doing right away is creating a sense of community in our digital classrooms and really finding an appropriate way to let our students know that we're there for them, that we know that this is a hard time. There are things that they are dealing with that we are maybe not even aware of, and just trying to create a safe space in a world that most teachers don't understand. How do you make a safe space on a computer screen?
Right.
Yeah.
And so Ashley did a webinar for Jen, which I had to miss because it was at like the same time I had to do a thing. But I remember in the like teaser for it, you were asked to bring an item.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I don't know what she's going to do with that item, and I'm real curious about it.
I'll go through it.
But my item was going to be my pink Jazz Girl button. That's what I was going to bring. And then I had like an emergency meeting on the budget that was scheduled, so I couldn't go. And so I thought maybe Ashley could talk to us about that and maybe for a while.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm going to grab just like one of the first objects that I see on my desk because...
And P.S. kids would so much love Beth's pen. Students would so much love, I think. It's like show and tell.
It is like show and tell.
Show and tell with fondness.
I know. Well, so the fun thing about the room that I'm in right now, not only does this double as my office space now, but, you know, back in the days where we saw people in person, this was my sewing and costume room. So in actuality, like that's a costume piece I'm working on. It's not a nun costume, just in case anyone viewing sees this.
Because you live in NOLA, so people
I do. So this is a
people
costume
in Seattle
room.
Don't wear costumes.
Yeah. It sounds weird that I have a costume room in a costume closet, but living here, it makes sense. But as a related, so I find when we're talking about our communities that sometimes we as educators struggle to articulate what our communities look like because the music classroom is a much different environment, a much different community than the rest of the school. You have a different sense of belonging in that space than you do in any other space. And I think that the same thing applies to the visual arts as well, to theater, to any of the performing arts and the visual arts. You really have this strong sense of community. So I asked everyone to bring an object. And at the start of this, we basically said, here are your 2 prompts. Or no, was it 2 or 3 prompts? Maybe 2. I couldn't remember how many. I may have left off a question here, but it's cool.
All right.
So first of all, you have to describe your object. So what is the object that you brought? So just tell us what it is. We don't really have to, explain too much more than what is this object. But then I asked everyone to use that object to explain how it represented the community that you work in and the community that you teach in. So how does this object reflect your communities? And so in my case, I actually did this on the Gen webinar, but I have something close and much smaller than the one I did on the Gen webinar. So I have this lovely
Wow.
costume piece. It has a little camel on it. So I am in a female dance troupe.
I'm so jealous. Before you talk about it, it's like it has Kelly written all over it. Okay, go ahead.
So I am in a female dance troupe called the Camel Toe Lady Steppers. Very intentional. Look, we're taking it back, okay?
Yes.
I'm empowered, just like Cardi B is right now. So I brought like a little. In that case, I had one of my larger headpieces that we had worn for Mardi Gras, but here's my small, quick version. So this is something that I made in one of our first crafting sessions. It's a little camel, something to wear, a little piece of flair, if you will. But for me, this really articulates the sense of belonging that I had with other women for the first time. And it made me feel really connected to the different types of traditions beyond music in our community. So in particular, the women dance troupe phenomenon started because of the baby dolls. And the baby dolls, I suggest that everyone take some time to do some research on the baby dolls. A group of Black women who basically stormed through and made Mardi Gras available for women.
Nice.
The baby dolls still exist. There's like a new incarnation of the baby dolls, but it's just it makes me feel so connected to the women that fought so hard for women to participate in carnival time culture. And it's something that I love. Like, it's just really one of those core things that I love about my community. So this was my object. And of course, the objects that folks brought were completely varied. My favorite comment that was on the Gen webinar, some folks forgot, so they literally grabbed the first object they had. Like, it included anything from a beer bottle to, a book that was on their desk. But it really allowed for some reflection about how you engage, like what makes you excited, what makes you happy about the spaces that you're in. It almost gives you more of an appreciation, especially now where we can't be together. Just gives you that fondness and appreciation for your community.
Like what makes you stoked when you wake up in the morning.
Exactly.
What are you proud of about yourself? Cool. I like that.
So I mean, honestly, this is an exercise that you can use with your students too, but I use that as a jumping off point because sometimes, again, we can get a little nervous when we're thinking about the communities that we work in. We're like, I don't know which part of my identity do you want me to talk about? And it's that mentality of like siloing yourself and siloing the different parts of your identity. I mean, we obviously should be a lot more intersectional beings because that's what we are. And we should think about ourselves as intersectional. But in the context of teaching in the classroom, we often just silo ourselves. So that was
right. I mean, our students think we live at school. We're just a music teacher and that's what we are. But when you start to show yourself to your students, they are so much more willing to give of themselves, which is of course what's required to play music in a connected, soulful way. So you have to find ways to do that.
Also, just holding an object gives you, like, sometimes when people are asked, tell me about yourself, we don't know where to start. We don't know what to say. Kids don't know what to say. If they're holding an object that has an actual story, that gives them a place to start.
It does.
And I know I've been sitting through teacher meetings, getting ready for the year to start. And I know for a fact that our district is saying, you're going to need to spend a considerable amount of time on social emotional learning, no matter what subject you teach. And, even as music teachers, we are not exempt from needing to do that important work with kids.
We shouldn't be exempt.
No. And, we really, and honestly, we need ideas too. So this is a good idea. And
Great idea. I love
and
it.
something that can totally be worked into day one.
Yeah. And
Day one lesson plan.
it's such a easy thing to ask. Something else that I saw, someone posed this on Twitter pretty recently, that the way that they start the first day of school and the way that they actually, and this kind of relates more into the topic that I was presenting on, uh, what they do in the first day of school is ask all of their students the way that their family cooks rice.
Oh,
Uh,
that's cool.
and so it's a way that you can connect to see like how rice, which is a pantry staple,
Yeah.
it's so different across cultures, across
Yeah.
families, in terms of the way that we prepare it. And it allows you a connection to kind of see behind the curtain in terms of the culture that their
Yep.
family has.
And to learn about other ways to cook rice.
Also, that
And that's another thing. Everybody needs to eat. Like
that's true.
that's a universal that
It's
we
an
all
easy
share.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I use that whole community exercise to really dig in a little bit deeper to culturally responsive pedagogies and rather culturally responsive teaching, culturally relevant pedagogy, and digging in a little bit more as a way, it's really a way of integrating social emotional learning in a way that it's also uplifting the voices within your community and
Yes.
also uplifting voices that are not represented within your classroom. And I think it really provides context, of how we are, like what we see in our classroom, what we see that our students have, how our individual teachers are connecting to community, and where are those gaps. Um, so, I mean, because you brought up first day of school activities, and because we already are on first day of school activities,
Keep on rolling.
I'll keep on rolling because come on, we're all teachers here.
Wait, before we move past the item though,
yeah.
for music teachers, sometimes your roster is 80 kids in a class and you've got an hour. So I can see sharing one object going over multiple days.
This could
Yeah.
be a month of activities.
And I can see value in sharing more than one item because people are very complex, as we've said.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
I would like to share more than one item. It's hard
Right?
to pick one.
Right? It's so hard. I mean, that's also an opportunity where you can have breakout time for your students to actually have some time together, and using the breakout room feature on Zoom. If you are using Zoom in your classroom,
Right.
how amazing is that you can allow for the space and the agency for your students to connect together and share out together, because they're going to start feeling more connected.
Or maybe it's not something that we just do at the beginning of school. Maybe it's something we do on the first Friday of every month, or just always.
A common practice.
Yeah.
So it could evolve into a place of musical sharing. Like, okay, we're not sharing items. We're not sharing items from our own that represent us and our communities anymore. Now, next month, I want everyone to share a piece of music that they think is really hip, or something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's super cool. Yeah. So, I mean, all these things are so relevant within the classroom. It also just allows you to connect with your students on this much deeper level. I mean, so often, especially in music classrooms where we have these rosters of so many kids in our classroom, you don't always get to have that same level of connection like other teachers get to. I mean, yes, you eventually grow those families the more time that you have your students in your program, but those early years, that early connection, you don't always get to make that same level of connection. So
I mean, I always sort of felt like if I can find a way for this whole class to feel connected to me, that's a start. And someone's got to be connected to somebody. So let's try and get kind of everyone
figure it out.
connected to me, and then we can grow from there. But things are different now, so it's cool that we can evolve.
Yeah, some of our old practices before COVID, we enjoyed opportunities to travel with kids. I would say that traveling with kids was probably the biggest way to connect each other
Totally.
to each other.
Yeah.
And we're not
in
doing
fact,
that.
I had some major life-changing trips with students down to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like anyone who goes there for the first time spends the rest of their life figuring out how they can get back there more often. Like,
And how they can make their own life feel like that all the time.
it's actually it's part of my way of life. I'm always trying to figure out, how can I get back down to New Orleans? How can I learn more New Orleans music?
Yeah.
How
You
can
know-
I make daily life like a party?
Yeah.
How can I have fun all the time?
'Cause, I mean, we definitely have a much different way of operating, and you know, we definitely celebrate things in a much more big way.
But as a musician, like,
as
I mean,
musicians, it's
hello,
crucial.
I'm a jazz musician and a jazz educator. Like, that is the foundation of this music that we have, like, really lost that. In
Yeah,
educational jazz, we have really lost that feeling of fun and community and an all play and all of that. We have 100% lost that.
Yeah.
And Beth is a bluegrass specialist, and I think that there are really very similar through lines.
Yeah.
The spirit of the music and the process.
It's interesting how academia has hindered in some ways the purpose of music.
Oh man.
I mean, I think it's an example of gatekeeping to the max.
Also
I know these things. You have to know these things.
You have to, and I think as we also just kind of in a general thinking, as we go into this year of virtual instruction, this is a great time to reflect on why or how you have been teaching. And for me, in many other New Orleans educators I know would say the same thing. Music education should not be about this one directional, I am the teacher and I'm telling you how to perform this. Music education is about an ongoing transference of knowledge. I am learning things from my students and they are learning things from me. We are constantly learning together. And if we don't treat music education that way, like, we're doing it wrong.
Man, it's just so crazy. When I was waiting for Kelly to open up this Zoom meeting, I was reading an article that was posted by a professor at the at ETSU in Tennessee, and his name is Lee Bidgoods, and he's a professor, PhD in like bluegrass. They actually have a bluegrass program there. It's pretty sweet. Cool. But anyway, he's been posting some pretty neat articles because he's a very thoughtful educator. And the article that he posted just now was rethinking the idea of using rubrics.
Interesting.
It was, and then I read the whole article, and it makes an argument that utilizing rubrics, which is something that became en vogue over the last like 10, 12 years, I suppose. Even to the point where I know that the Washington State teachers' evaluation system is based on a series of rubrics. But just that utilizing rubrics ultimately steals the human aspect from anything that students do. And what does that mean to us as music educators?
So
well, why don't we have him on for an episode to
talk about that? He's absolutely brilliant.
Because I hate rubrics.
So
and I want to talk about it.
This actually brings up something that I had mentioned in the webinar, and I got asked in some follow-up conversations, was the conversation about grading in music.
Yeah.
And so I have some strong feelings and I'm happy to share them. To start, it's racist. But
thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here for it. I'm here for the assist.
Hey.
And it's racist.
There might be some people who ask for follow-up evidence of that.
I'm happy to provide that. But look, so to start, grading as it relates to music education, that is not something we are taught. What we are basically forced into doing is meeting the criteria that matches our school's grading. We are asked to fit into a framework that is meant for core subjects. So to start, it is a thing that is meant for core subjects. Now, that being said, I know music is a core subject. Thank you. But for the purposes of the exercise of how our administration views music, they don't always view it as a core subject.
It's something that has answers that are right or wrong.
Exactly.
Therefore, you can give a score to it,
Scores,
which can transfer into a grade.
Exactly.
And anyone who tried to put their grade book together is like, oh, really?
Yeah. How do you do it?
We know that that framework just doesn't work. It is a policy that is in place that really is more for the neurotypical students that thrive in a testing environment. And again, that's a racist environment. Those sorts of policies are in fact racist. And so that's where my thought process on why grades are racist.
I am so there for that.
So, this article also pointed out that this whole concept is basically stealing from like for-profit business.
Wow.
And kind of comparing or putting education into a business model, like a profit-based business model, and thinking of it in that way makes me even more like.
That's so. I guess to add to my grading is racist train of thought, what I was suggesting to educators and just in general, one thing that we have not always had the opportunity to do as music educators, and we are also not taught to do, is to ask our students what their musical goals are. We often start at the school year and we don't ask our kids what their goals are.
Because you know what? We don't care what their goals are. And even if we did, we're not going to help you accomplish them because we're going to learn Holst and we're going to perform it at the festival and we're going to get a gold star and a trophy. Okay?
Exactly.
That is exactly why.
Yeah. And so
we don't care.
Anyways, you know, most music educators don't ask these things. And again, we're in this space of virtual learning, so why don't we undo and unlearn our behaviors?
Yes,
I know, the craziest thing. So I've suggested like ask their goals, and honestly, if you have to, and if you're forced to give a grade based on your school making you give grades, use this as an opportunity to basically base whatever their grading system is based on like how are they meeting their own personal goals. Your students can assess themselves. Students do that really well, and that's a skill that we have to teach kids.
And teach them. We're the teacher. We need to teach them how to do that.
Right. It's like we have to give them the space and the agency to assess themselves. But, you know, beyond that, like, yeah, you can make up a rubric of something so that your school has, you know, this is what I'm doing. But in actuality, you're going based on how they assess themselves. Of course, you can give them helpful tips and guidance along the way, because that's how we become better musicians.
Yeah.
But we do not become better musicians because we have a grade. We just don't. No. And it's a hindrance more than anything else.
If I could just get rid of grade books forever, I would be.
It'd be great. Things would be beautiful.
Just seeing ourselves as like, I would rather see myself as an educator as opposed to someone who stands on a box and waves around a stick. I would rather see myself as a facilitator, a maker of connections, a person who provides tools for communicating, and also provides nuts and bolts skills. You definitely need, I'm a violinist and I teach strings. You definitely need to know how to hold your stringed instrument properly. Yeah, you definitely need to know how to do a bow hold and move your bow arm. And these things are specifics.
Mechanical, technical things that we
These are specifics, and we should definitely have a really high bar for making sure that students have proper technique, yes, but
otherwise we're not doing our jobs.
right.
Right.
But other than that, I want to see myself as this facilitator. How do I get you from point A to point B to realize your goals in music? And along the way, here are some cool ideas, because we also are formers of, like, we help students form what those goals are. Sometimes
Right.
they come to us not yet with goals that are not yet formed. And in some ways, we are the people that guide people to their goals.
Yeah.
And seeing myself
true.
as that sounds way more fun than like freaking out about the fact that I'm trying to conduct Ketchaturian.
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, and just to be like in the era of full transparency, I think that is a reason why I started doing more community-based programming and got myself in the nonprofit space
Yep.
versus staying in the classroom.
Mhm.
I was instantly feeling disillusioned with the fact that I was being forced to create these guidelines and these stipulations in a space where my principal did not want to foster basically music education. I was all the other classes had smart boards. I still had the chalkboard. Like like I still had the books from the 80s. Yeah, it's like clearly you don't care enough about this. You're using this as a time for your other teachers to take a break, and music is more than that. And we know that. And obviously I'm preaching to the choir here, but we know that music is more than that. And we have a lot of
add rubrics and we
Mm-hmm.
go for the trophy to try and validate
Yes.
our subject. But really,
And we should never have to feel that way. Honestly, like, are your kids having fun? Then great, you've done a great job. Like, it's as simple as that for me in music. And I mean, I feel the same way as a performer, as an adult. Like, am I having fun? Then great. Like,
is the
I should keep
audience
doing this.
dancing to this music and smiling? I'm nailing it.
Great, I'm doing such a good job. Like,
That's
everyone's
a
having fun.
very NOLA way of thinking of things.
Yeah.
Like,
I would love to have like a resource of, one-on-one conversation with students. How do you extract the information from them that shows you that they are making progress toward their goal? And then how do you then turn around and enter that into the typical gradebook that teachers have to use?
Well, I think part of that starts with the beginning of the school year. And again, going back to what's about to happen for a lot of folks right now, the start of the school year is crucial to ask a few big things. The first one, the biggest one for me, is learning how you say your student's name correctly. That's number one on my list.
Let me point out that I have on paper right here how a little
I see it, and I'm using my pen to point. Yay! I love it.
Shabankareh.
Boom! You got it. You had it.
That was my first question, Ashley. I don't want to screw up your last name.
It was your first question, and I just have to say that doesn't always happen to me. Most folks don't ask me how to say my last name. I think over time they've started to, because I know I'm just going to correct them. But that's one of the biggest things at the start of the year, as we start building in that community with our students on Zoom. If we don't even know how to call in their names on Zoom, and if we also don't ask their pronouns and also make sure that we don't have their dead names in our books, like, we're doing it wrong. We are doing it wrong. And that's like number one, setting that space for your students to actually tell you. And that doesn't have
space of safety, first of all.
Exactly. I mean, you don't have to start by doing that over Zoom with everyone in the room.
No.
You literally can send them, something in Google Classroom, or again, whatever platform you're using, or hell, even use no, Padlet wouldn't make sense for this. So have them send you an email where they record how they say their name.
You know what is saving my butt at this time is Remind. It's a texting service. Text the kid on Remind and tell them to send you a pronunciation, either a recording or you know,
or
of
like
spelling.
spell it out.
Yeah.
It's such a simple thing to do, and ask those other questions as well. You know, I think the recording or pronunciation guide is super crucial, but again, what are your pronouns? Let me know so I
Yeah.
can write it
Here.
down in my book,
I
you
mean,
know?
seriously, like I've used Remind to seriously ask a student, can you remind me what your pronoun is before I address them in public?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like I'm on a Zoom. I want to talk about this student who is on the Zoom. I text them during my Zoom, and then they give me information back, and
that's
it helps.
amazing.
It helps.
It's so crucial. I mean, I think number one, that's the first way that you start. But beyond that, you know, and having exercises that connect you to one another, connects you into what you're about to be doing with one another and their colleagues. But the other big thing that I advocate for and I have found has worked really well in programs that I have run is surveying your students right off the bat, and not a survey of like, tell me how you think you do on this thing. It's literally, what are your favorite musical genres?
Mhm.
Who are your favorite musical artists or singular artists? You know, tell me as many as you want to share.
Right.
What
What do
are
you have
the,
on repeat?
yeah, like what's on repeat? What's the song you can't stop listening to? What are, you know, in terms of this list of musical topics, what makes you most excited?
Yeah.
You know, asking these questions, and also tell me more about you in the way that you would like to tell me. Tell me who you are, you know, so that way, and don't phrase it as tell me who you are. But um, allow that space of allowing your students to actually explain themselves. And I am such a big advocate of doing this at the start of your school year. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be hard. Honestly, you could say this is an assignment, but give them time to just give you this information and use
You
that
know,
to inform
language
yourself.
arts and social studies teachers have been doing this forever. I was
Uh-huh.
asked to do that probably 30 years ago for my
Yeah.
English teacher. It's
Yeah.
not a new idea, but
It's not.
it's a great idea for music teachers.
It is.
We
And
don't do that.
we don't do that. You know, we are go go go. We have this competition. I'm hell bent and super focused on this next activity because these are these expectations and these burdens that we have in our classroom, because otherwise we feel like we aren't viewed as valid members of our school community unless we
And
do so.
also, I want to add like the stress of our product or our worth is on display, right? Like you
Right.
can walk by a math classroom and not really have a sense of what kids are or are not learning.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
you can stand outside of a music room and you can know what's going on in there. Right?
Oh,
You
you
can
know.
hear or not hear success.
You
Like,
know.
and you feel judged.
You do. And yeah, I mean, again, that's why I advocate for these things, just because it allows you that opportunity and grace for yourself to start figuring out, how do I move into this space of incorporating other things? How do I move out of this traditional, classical, you know, European centric style of music education and into a space where my students' interests are not a novelty?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I'm thinking. One, a lot of teachers don't have skills in those kinds of music, so they think that they can't do that, and so they don't, and
Mm-hmm.
they just kind of let it go bye bye. And the other thing that I'm thinking is, um, it's really startling, but it's true. Um, what we do is kind of both an academic thing, but also exists in the world of extracurricular and, in particular, sports, which are competitive things. So, for some reason, we've moved music into this world of competition where um, there are adjudicated and ranked festivals as part of like the district offerings and stuff like that. And Sometimes it's even funded by like the state sports organization.
Yeah.
And it's just like this weird existence that we as public school teachers have to like dance through, because these are expectations. It's aligned with sports and competition. Um, we do want to incorporate all these things, but we don't know how, because I'm a classical violinist and I don't know anything about jazz, but I want to, but I don't know what to do. It's a big conundrum.
It is. Well, and when we get in that space as educators or we don't know something, we don't default do the thing that we normally tell our students to do, which is ask for help. We don't default ask for help. Hello, we tell our students this all the time. And so in this instance, and again, this is something that I really preached on pretty hard. When in doubt, there are so many community organizations that have artist educators and teaching artists and former classroom educators who want to support you and your students. They are there. They are there for you.
Kelly, I'm going to just like draw a thread through a lot of our episodes that we've had and many guests. They are saying something extremely similar to what you just said.
We're here.
Bring in members of the community.
Yeah.
They're saying tap into the community, and you just reiterated it again. So thank you.
I mean, I'm happy to. I think it's just one thing that we as music educators, when we first go through the education training, we are not conditioned to do. We are basically told outright, you have to be the silo. You have to be the one that knows how to do it all. And let's be honest about that. It's so unrealistic to think that any one person can contain all the knowledge of all musical genres, of all ways of doing things. We all have specialties just like other folks do.
And there's beauty in that.
And
there
fun.
is.
Fun.
There is, because we bring in our own perspectives in that process.
Right.
And, you know, I'm so glad that so many other folks have brought up bringing in the community, because it's true. We are here. We are resources. We have been in the same positions that all of us, you know, all of us have been in the same situation.
We're all out of work right now, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I would take $50 to do a team building exercise with just about anyone's class right now. My calendar is empty, yo.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not really true. I'm working full time, and my full time is more like 60 hours a week because I don't know how to stop working. But I still would do it because I love it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that all of us who are in music do this because we love it.
Yeah.
We want to share our love of this with young people. And I think we lose sight of that because we've been conditioned. And I recognize you had brought up a point earlier about like, how do we kind of change that system of being the competitive thing? And again, that's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think with more of a critical mass and an understanding that we can't just apply competition to every subject.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to require a lot of dismantling of systems. And it's not an easy thing, but I think the more that we as music educators make our communities, which include like our principals and our school leaders, you know, like our school boards, aware of the value of what music has to offer beyond competitions.
Music for music's sake.
Exactly. You know, we're all, I feel like at the beginning of this whole time frame where we switched to virtual so quickly, everyone was like, oh, like I had this big appreciation for the arts and music and television and blah, 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 blah. And it's like,
teachers should make $1 million.
Exactly. Oh, give them all the money. And I feel like we have to reiterate that again of we use music in multiple ways. And it's not like the music that exists within our playlist is competing with one another. They all contain that sort of same value and weight depending on situations. On a much deeper level though, like I know that we have our own national art standards, but I personally am in this mindset that those need to be expanded to include 21st century skills, because and just creating and performing and responding and analyzing. Yeah, that's cool. That does teach you how to be a really great musician, but does it teach us the skills that we all know come along with music too?
Well, interestingly, the national standards document does have what they call dispositions, and those are actually basically the 21st century skills. I don't think that they are looked at, utilized, or there's no importance placed on it yet. And what we as teachers need to do is start doing that.
Yeah,
We need to
it's
start
true.
doing that and
It's
bringing
true.
attention to them.
Because we just look at the high level. We just start at the high level. We don't go in the granular level. And that's
Right.
the unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
Well, gals, I have lost track of time. We have gone
Way over.
because, you know,
Oops.
Ashley's such a genius. But what we're going to do right now is Ashley is not going to leave.
I'm not going to leave.
No, don't go.
I'm
We're
not
going to
going.
just, don't go. We're just going to go off of Facebook Live, and I'm going to let the people in our waiting room in for our closed teacher chat for clock hours.
Cool.
Bye to Facebook.
Hi, Facebook Live.
We love you all. And
Thank you.
I'm stopping the live stream in 3,